it's interesting, like doing these online and in person. Like every time I either have one person here or one or two people at home. So at least I'm not doing them all by myself, but hopefully everybody can watch the videos if they can't make it to keep up.
I've been having like rehearsals and stuff for a lot.
Yeah.
Right after school.
That and okay, so going to look at the section on motivation. The first topic that we looked at in motivation would have been the different theories. So when you're looking at motivation, why are we motivated to do the things we do? Basically, is what we're starting off with. What drives us to get out of bed in the morning? All right, so the first theory is just a very basic theory, the instinct. And again, every time we look at these theories, there isn't just one that explains everything. They all have some merit. They all, play their own role in why we do the things we do. First of all, instinct. So an instinct is an unlearned natural behavior that we're born with. And we talked about all of the reflexes that babies are born with, the rooting reflex, the startle-moro reflex. Also, like blinking. If someone blows air in our face, we're going to blink. So that explains our instincts, our reflexes that we have. The common question, because this more so relates to animals. Animals have more instinctual behavior than we do. But I have salmon up here because that's a common question about this, that salmon swim upstream to spawn. So that's explained by the instinct theory. A cat cleans itself. It's not really taught to do that. It's just something that happens. All right, so that's the first theory. Second theory we looked at is also a physical theory. The instinct and this theory are physiological, looking at something internal. So drive reduction. So we have an internal need that we're driven to satisfy. So this is simple as you're hungry, you get up and get something to eat. You're thirsty, you go get a drink. The common AP question here is the goal. The goal is homeostasis. You don't want to be too cold or too hungry. You don't want to be too warm or too cold. You want that internal balance. So you have that internal need and you're driven to satisfy it. Another question I often see with the theories is it'll ask which are the two biological theories. So that would be the first two, physiological or biological. Okay, the third is more environmental. This would be the incentive theory. So according to this theory, we're driven by something external in our environment to do something. Money would be a great incentive to, if you want someone to do something, here, I'll pay you. So it's not something physical that's going on. You're doing something to get some reward, or it could be to avoid a punishment. It sounds a lot like operant conditioning. Now, falling under that, there are two different types of motivation that are external, basically. Either you like it or you don't. Intrinsic motivation, you are doing something because you want to. Your own reward is your satisfaction. So I use the example of me running. I'd like to run. It's a stress reliever. I like it. I enjoy it. Where extrinsic motivation, people are doing it because they want some benefit. So some people run to lose weight. That would be the extrinsic reward. So I gave another example about an AP class, and that's a question I've seen before too. Some people take an AP class just because they're interested in it. So that's intrinsic. You like it. Some people take an AP class just to get the college credit. They really don't care about it. They're doing it for that external reward. It's not something they really like. Sometimes, oops, I enlarged that for some reason. Sometimes if you get a reward for something that once was intrinsic, you'll no longer do that because you just like it. You always expect that reward. And this is the over justification effect. So I use the example of my daughter, or my oldest daughter. My girls are 8 years apart. So my oldest daughter used to babysit her younger sister when I had to go to the store, and she would just do it and play with her and have a good time, and she thought that, that's what big sisters should do. And they actually enjoyed hanging out together. She would have been about 13 and her sister was 5. I paid her one time. I gave her that reward, and she would never do it again unless she got that payment. So that's over justification effect. And that all falls under incentive. All right, the fourth theory we've talked about many times, so you should know this well. Maslow, who's a humanist, believed that we are motivated at different levels. That certain needs have to be met before we're motivated to focus on more complex things. So at the bottom, physiological needs, that refers to basically food and water. If you're going hungry, you can't focus on anything else. That's all you think about. And I said in class, if I go up until lunch and I'm not had anything to eat, I'm starting to lose focus because all I can think about is food. So if that need isn't met, you're stuck there. If that need is met, if you have food and water, next thing is your security needs, feeling safe in your environment. So if that need is met, then you move up to feeling like you belong with someone. We're very social, and everyone needs to feel love and connection and that they belong somewhere, whether it's family, a significant other, just a friend, just having someone. So that's your social needs. If all of those are met, then we move on to focusing on ourselves, liking ourselves, accepting who we are, our own abilities, and things like that. Not everyone will get to the highest level here. Self-actualization, that's usually on the AP test somewhere. What's your fullest potential? You guys should know that well by now. So your fullest potential would mean you're living up to all of your dreams and expectations. And sometimes we doubt ourselves and we fall short of that. So not everyone gets there. All right, and another question I've often seen, we'll be putting them in order. The two that people get mixed up are which order belongingness and esteem needs go. But we tend to have the need to interact with others before we have the need to really be accepting of ourselves. So just think about that. All right, the fifth theory is the optimal arousal theory. So according to this theory, you want that homeostasis. Again, you don't want to be too bored and you don't want to be too stressed. So this theory kind of explains risk-taking, why we need to be too bored. And everybody has a different optimal level. Like I'm not jumping out of an airplane, but there's some people who really want to do that. So they really crave stimulation. So their point of homeostasis is much higher than mine would be. But, we don't like to be overstressed. We don't like to be too bored. If you're too stressed, you need to, go do something exciting, take a walk, take a break. If you're bored, sitting in class, you get out your phone, you try to stimulate yourself in some way. Falling under that is a law, the Yerkes-Dodson law. Okay, this says that for most people, we work better for most tasks at a moderate level. Okay, so think about it. You want a moderate level when you're taking a test. You don't be tired and you don't be overstimulated and stressed and have racing thoughts. You want that moderate level. An exception is if you're doing a task that doesn't require mental activity but requires high energy, like running, something like that, you're going to work better with a higher stimulation and not under stimulation. So that's the only exception. Most things we work better at a moderate level. All right, so those were the theories. Let's see. Next thing we looked at in this section was hunger motivation. All right. All right, so we looked at different theories again on what makes us want to eat. And here again, there isn't one explanation that says, okay, this is absolutely why we eat. They all, play a role in making us hungry or our appetite. All right, so the first person in the early 1900s, it was like 1911, I believe, was Washburn. And his assistant Cannon. Washburn's really famous for this, but Walter Cannon helped too. So they believed that the reason that we feel hungry is because we are having stomach contractions. Our stomach contractions, our hunger pangs make us hungry. So they had subjects swallow those balloons that were connected to a wire that was connected to a panel that recorded when our stomach contracted. Now, they inflated the balloon once it went into the stomach, and they wanted the subjects, and they actually participated in this as well. They wanted the subjects to record when they felt hungry. So they were looking to find a connection between the hunger pangs or the stomach contractions and them reporting that they were hungry. And they actually did in those experiments that they did. When the people recorded they were hungry, they'd look and their stomachs were contracting. It took several weeks of practice just to get this experiment going, because your gag reflex is naturally going to want you to not swallow a balloon. So they had to keep training the individuals to get rid of that gag reflex and allow they had to condition them and allow the balloon to go down their throat. But in the early 1900s, if you would have taken a psychology class or you were in nursing or in the medical field, it was concluded at that time that stomach contractions made you hungry. All right, so then later on, a couple decades later, we found that glucose or your blood sugar plays a big role in your appetite as well. And I guess it was around 1930s or 40s, they started removing the stomachs of patients who had cancer, stomach cancer, and just attaching the esophagus to the digestive tract. And they still reported they were hungry. So it just can't be stomach contractions. So right after that, we found that blood sugar levels have a great impact on your behavior or on your appetite. But we know that if you go without food, you can tell when your glucose levels fall because you feel hungry, you feel shaky and sweaty. So to prove this theory, a man named Bash took two dogs, and that's why I have the dog up here, and he did a blood transfusion. One dog, he starved, and the other dog was very well fed. Okay, so one has high glucose, the other one doesn't. He did a blood transfusion between the two. And what was interesting is the dog who was really full got the blood sugar of the hungry dog and presented with food it wanted to eat. The starving dog who hadn't eaten all day, when he got the blood sugar of the full dog, refused food. So we know blood sugar absolutely plays a role. So whenever we eat, our blood sugar rises and insulin is released from the pancreas in an average person, and the blood sugars come back down. And someone who is diabetic, they don't produce insulin like most people, so they have to take a shot of insulin to bring the blood sugar back down. All right, so stomach contractions make us hungry, blood sugar levels make us hungry, but we also know the hypothalamus plays a big role. And there's often a question about one of the appetite hormones. It's usually leptin. That seems to be the most popular. They often ask about insulin and where it's released. So obviously when the insulin's released, your blood sugar falls, and that makes you feel hungry. So that's one of the hunger hormones that we have. It increases hunger. Orexin comes directly from the hypothalamus whenever we don't have food in our system. Ghrelin comes from the stomach lining. So whenever your stomach is empty, it releases that hormone, travels to the brain and says, feed me, I'm hungry. All right, so after you start eating, you have two appetite suppressing hormones. One is leptin. Again, that's popular on the AP test. So leptin is released from the fat cells whenever you start eating. And PYY, as food moves through your digestive tract, that hormone is released. And both of those go up to the brain to say, I'm getting full, stop eating. But I said before, hormones move very, very slow. So if you eat real fast and you don't give those hormones time to get to your brain, chances are you'll overeat. Neurotransmitters in the body are very fast with the nervous system, but the endocrine system and your hormones are very slow. So eat slower, you won't eat as much. Give those hormones time to get to the brain. All right, in addition to appetite hormones, we know that there's specific parts of the hypothalamus that regulate our appetite. So they do the fat rat experiment to study the different parts of the hypothalamus. So we have two parts. We have the lateral, which is represented in green on the diagram on the outside, and the ventromedial indicated by the red on the inside. Okay, so again, if you lesion the lateral, okay, so lesion is remove, you will feel full. So if you remove that, you'll feel full. And when they did that in a rat, okay, they lesioned this, a starving rat would refuse food. If you stimulate this, even if you're very full, a rat would just eat and eat and eat and eat. So this stimulates hunger if you electrically stimulate that lateral. And then the ventromedial is the opposite. And I don't remember, Ashton, if you were here when I did this, but if you were here when I did the L and the L, okay, yeah, if you lesion the lateral, so you make an L, another L below it, you flip that over, that makes an F. So lesion the lateral, you feel full. When I took my boards, because that's hard to memorize, but if you know that, then you can fill in everything else. When I took my boards, I went in and wrote it at the top of my paper. But one of those will be on the test. All right, so the next theory is the set point theory. This is a theory that basically states the weight you're going to be is set in your genes, and then it's regulated by the hypothalamus, because your hypothalamus controls your metabolism, how fast your food is digested. So according to this set point theory, your body's always trying to keep you at that ideal weight. So if you gain weight, your metabolism will speed up to try and get you back down to that. If you go below that, your metabolism slows down to try and get you back to that. And I said before, that's why people in a concentration camp do not die immediately. Their body goes into that defense mode. They start to lose weight. So their body slows down. Their metabolism slows down to keep them from losing weight rapidly. So in other words, that's why if you gain weight and you go above it and you go on a diet, you may be successful right away. And then you hit that wall. You're like, why can't I lose anymore? It's because your body's fighting you. You're at probably close to your set point. It's hard to go below that. All right, so the fifth theory is heat production theory. So according to this theory, it's the temperature that makes us hungry. And this was proposed by Brodbeck. Both set point and this theory came out in the 90s. So they say when your body temperature drops, okay, you feel hungry. When it's cold out, we do feel hungry. We feel more hungry in the winter months. When your body temperature goes up, if you're working out or if it's hot out, most of us lose our appetite. So body temperature and the weather impact our our appetite. And if you think about if you've ever had a fever, you're not really hungry. Your body temperature is going up and you lose your appetite. So heat production theory. All right, but that's not the only reason why. All of those are physical factors, biological factors, but we know that you don't only just eat when you physically feel hungry. We have a lot of psychological reasons why we eat. If I see, this just happened to me. Someone brought in cake today and I didn't know it. And I already ate lunch, my husband brought me Little Caesars pizza and I was full. I mean, I kept saying, oh, I ate too much. I feel miserable. But I walked in down there and this cake with buttercream icing sitting there. I'm like, well, I have to have that. That's psychological. I really wasn't hungry, but I know how good it tastes. So I had to have a little piece of it. Just the smell, the appearance. We've had learned times. This is meal time. You go to lunch right now. If you're hungry or not, this is when you eat because, you know, and that would be difficult for me if I had to go 5-4. I like eating before that, but you know, we have these specified times. Some people eat when they're stressed. Some people eat when they're bored. I do it out of habit at night when I sit and watch TV, and I know that's not good when you're watching TV at 9, 10 o'clock at night. But these are all different psychological reasons why we eat, or external reasons why we eat. All right, so those are the theories behind why we eat. And also, you know, the appearance of food. You know, culture plays a role. You know, some people don't like frog legs. Other places, it's a delicacy. I like sushi. Some people won't eat it because they don't like raw fish. I love it. Peruvian ants, definitely not going to try that. But in Peru, they love it. Bull testicles in South and Central America, I'm not going to try that, but people love them down there. So culture plays a role as well. All right, so we looked at obesity, which is defined as someone who's 20% over their ideal body weight. And to calculate that is the body mass index. Students used to have to know this for the AP test. I mean, there's so many different websites that you can calculate it. Now you don't have to know the equation, but just know that what BMI stands for, body mass index, and it gives you a score to determine, you know, what percent you're over your ideal body weight. So a BMI of 30 or more would give you would be considered obese. The book talks a lot about the negative impacts on our health from being in an obese category. Of course, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, gallstones, arthritis, just to name a few. For the first time, I guess about 7 years ago, because of the high obesity rates, our life expectancy went down for the first time since modern medicine was invented and vaccines. Yeah, and it's because of 1 in 3 Americans fall, and it's about 33% fall into the obese category. So, I mean, that's a huge toll on the health of our nation. And diabetes, and I'm talking type 2 diabetes, so which is also known as adult onset. I grew up in the 80s. That's when I was in high school. And I looked back at a statistic, and 1 to 2% of children under 18 had type 2 diabetes. Today it's 20%. It's 1 in 5. And it's that's kind of alarming. So I don't know what's going to be done. I mean, when President Obama was in office, his wife had the nutrition bill and tried to offset that, but as a nation, it's just continued to grow and grow. All right. The book asks or talks about the different body shapes. You'll see apple and pear shape. And I've seen this question before: which body type is more prone to health risks if they become obese? And it's the apple shape. Okay, so if you look at the diagram there, the apple shape would be on the right side. And that just means that if someone gains weight, it all centers around their vital organs here, which makes sense of why they'd be more at risk for heart disease and other types of ailments. Pear shape, if someone gains weight, it accumulates more around like the buttocks. Not that it's good, but they would be less at risk just because of where the location of the extra weight is located. Reasons for the high obesity rates: processed food, fast food plays a role. Healthy eating is expensive. You know, if you go to the market and you buy fresh produce and fruits and vegetables, it's very pricey, whereas it's a lot cheaper to buy McDonald's or, processed food that isn't very good for us. But it's continued to go up pretty bad over the last 40 years. And portion size, for some reason now we think supersized is great. It's not good for us, but we think we're doing good for what we pay, but smaller portions much better. There's also some social effects of obesity. They did a research study where they found that people who would go in and apply for a job who were more qualified than others, they were less likely to get hired if they were in the obese category. Insurance companies, a lot of insurance companies now are charging people who have a BMI over 30 extra money to pay for their premium because they're going to cost them more money. And some people just have become ridiculed, and some people have a negative attitude towards people in that obese category range. Okay, the other extreme, we looked at two different eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia. So someone with anorexia, it's usually a female, but not always, they fall below 15% of their ideal body weight, but it's psychological. They feel like they're still overweight. They still feel fat, even though in most cases you can see every rib in their body. They can't stand the feeling of having any food in their system. They drink coffee, usually smoke cigarettes, something to curb their appetite, suck on sugar-free candy, whatever they can. They don't want to get any calories in. And they often wear big, heavy clothes to hide their bodies because they're ashamed. They feel like they're overweight, even though they're not. This is the deadliest mental illness, as well as bulimia. 20% on average die of anorexia or bulimia if they have it. It's so hard to recover. They can't stand the thought of gaining weight. So they're malnourished and their organs just start to deteriorate. Like their heart, they just eat away at it. It deteriorates. Many of them have to get a pacemaker put in. Of course, they're not getting nutrients, so their teeth rot. They often lose their teeth. And it's really sad for the family to have to sit and watch this slow deterioration and be helpless and not be able to do anything. So bulimia, someone with bulimia will eat, and normally a lot of calories at one time, but then they purge. So it's a binge purge cycle, and that's common question on the AP test, binge purge associated with bulimia. But they have to get rid of it somehow. Most of them vomit, and they at first drink a lot with the food, especially carbonated drinks to help get the food up. Or they may use laxatives to get rid of the food or excessive exercise. Somehow they have to get rid of the food that they consumed. And again, they still have the same health risks and concerns that someone with anorexia would have because they're taking nutrients in, but it's coming right back up. So very sad. All right. So, for example, and someone with anorexia would look like this, and if they look in the mirror, that's basically what they see. They're disgusted with themselves, the misrepresentation. You look back, Marilyn Monroe, our actors and actresses now are really, really thin for the most part. That's starting to change a little bit, but back in the 50s, someone a size 10 was our sex symbol. Causes, well, it runs in families, but you don't know if that's really in the genes or it's just a family that's very focused on thinness. You don't know if it's nature or nurture. But they do find with twin studies, if one twin has an eating disorder, there's a high probability that the other one will, but most believe it's cultural. And that's because in Western cultures, it's very common. So like Europe, United States, Canada, it's rare that you find people with anorexia in like the Middle East and Asia, because thinness isn't, idealized like it is here. Okay, so that brings us to sexual orientation. management styles. Okay, so I don't think I need to go over the difference between homosexuality, heterosexuality, and bisexuality. But the book does talk a lot about how attitudes towards homosexuality varies. More accepting in obviously Western cultures in our country, et cetera, than, it's punishable by death in many of the Middle Eastern cultures. So, and in our culture, in particularly, attitudes have, changed a great deal over time. 1973, homosexuality was listed in the DSM as a mental illness, and today, in many states, it's legal to have an actual marriage. So it's very different. This goes to 2004, but today it's even less than that. All right, so yeah, I have a more up-to-date statistics. Are same-sex marriage is appropriate? And you can see that people saying not wrong at all. It's almost half of the population. In 2015, that's continued to go up. How is our sexual orientation determined? Well, it was once believed that your sexual orientation was due to your socialization, how your parents raised you. When questioning homosexuality, researchers would look for maybe an absent father, a very overbearing mother, thinking it's social. We know that there's no evidence whatsoever to support that. In fact, quite the opposite. We find all of these biological connections to our sexual orientation. So looking at different biological factors. First of all, we talked about the fact that if one twin is a certain sexual orientation, the other one is likely to have the same sexual orientation. Homosexuality tends to run in families. And we also talked about the fruit fly experiment that was done in the 90s, where scientists just tweaked a gene in fruit flies, and they started mating with the same sex. So that has to be something biological. All right, we looked at Simon LeVay. He studied cells in the hypothalamus. We know the hypothalamus controls everything hormonal. So the hypothalamus controls our sex drive. And he found that, of course, he did this after people died when they were doing autopsy. They looked at cell size in the hypothalamus, and they found that in a homosexual male, the cells in the hypothalamus were the same size as females. So they're much smaller than heterosexual males. So again, that has to be something biological. Socially, your cells in your hypothalamus just didn't shrink. They did not include lesbians in that study, so that limited that. Also, the hypothalamus activity. So if you look at a functional MRI scan, which shows activity in the brain, whenever a homosexual male or a straight female smells male pheromones or sweat, the hypothalamus becomes active. Now, a straight heterosexual male, when they smell male sweat, nothing happens. So again, there's something going on in the brain there. Also, there's hundreds of animal species that engage in homosexual activity. Obviously, that's not something socialized. That has to be something that's inborn. They're not learning that from their environment, in other words. Looking at hormones in the womb. So you're looking at prenatal development here. So they found that with rats, if they castrated them at birth, depriving them of testosterone, they did not want to mount females. In fact, then they were more receptive to a male when it came to intercourse, whereas females, when they were injected with male hormone, they tried to mount other rats like a male would. So there's something with the hormones that one is exposed to in the womb. The fraternal birth order, this is just something they found through statistics. So they found that the more older brother a male has, the more likely they will be gay. But it's very weird because it's only in right-handed men. If you're left-handed, your brain's organized in a different fashion, so it doesn't relate. But, excuse me, that's based on statistics, and they believe that the mother is building up antibodies with every subsequent male that she has. And again, this study did not look at lesbians, it was just males. But that's been the most recent finding. All right, management styles. So we have two different types of managers, theory X and theory Y. So theory X, they think that workers are extrinsically motivated. So you have to be on them at all times. You have to watch them or they'll be lazy. They won't do what they're told. So you're always having to kind of be on their back and push them and watch them and not give them freedom to really do what they want. So if you work in fast food or anything like that, you're dealing with the theory X. They don't really give you the creativity to make a Big Mac the way you want it. You have a very rigid, different procedures that you have to do. On the other hand, a theory Y, these managers give their workers creativity and freedom to do what they want. They believe that workers will do things the right way just because they want to, that they're intrinsically motivated, so that they're not as distrusting. Okay, and the last thing, I'm not really going into it, but it's again, two things you need to know with sexual motivation. First of all, the Masters and Johnson study, that's a common question. Find that on Schoology here. So the Masters and Johnson study is the study that they actually came up with the different stages that we go through during sexual intercourse. So let me put it up to show you. So people actually went to a lab and had sex in front of people watching them so they could find out the different stages our body physically goes through. And then they came up with the 4 stages, which the only question I've ever seen about sexual motivation is the name of the study, the Masters and Johnson, and you'll have to know this order of the sexual response cycle. That's common. So they'll be all mixed up. You'll just have to put them in order. The initial phase, plateau, orgasm, then resolution. So another term for the resolution is the refractory period. And that's everything. So I recommend, if you're watching this, that you look over the questions in the practice book and let me know if you have any questions about any of those. All right, I'm signing off. Have a good night.